Yours truly matters. Leader Fan Radio Network.
Okay, calm down.
And KFAN.com. 2 minutes and 6 seconds past 3 o'clock Central Daylight Time. We welcome you back to a midweek edition of the Bumper to Bumper program on a calm before the Ice Nami Wednesday afternoon here in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. My name is Dan Barreiro, the host of the program. Guardsy is out today and tomorrow. Brett Blakemore is back in that chair. We have an outstanding cavalcade of guests via the uglydeck.com lineup. We'll give you more details in just a minute or two. In fact, really, the opening salvo will be, I think, there will be a direct connection between the first segment of the program and our 3:15 guest on baseball, Aaron Gleeman. And I'm sure he knows a lot about what I'm referring to here regarding size in baseball. We have, much to the delight of the substitute producer of the program, actually the regular producer of the program as well, and many of you other replay terrorists, we have a new system on calling balls and strikes and appealing balls and strikes as well. It's off to a great start, by the way. In any case, if you're going to properly, if that system is going to work, I guess, as good as advertised, guess what the computers or the lasers or whatever technology is used here to get this done, guess what they're going to need the truth on? How tall baseball players actually are. Not what is put in the program or, on the roster online, but your actual height now matters. So what have we come to find out? We have already come to find out that hundreds of Major League Baseball players, well, I shouldn't say hundreds. I'm exaggerating a little bit. Dozens. Okay, it doesn't sound quite as sexy, but it's still decent. Dozens of hitters have either been told what they probably already knew or what they had no choice but to know, that they are not as tall as they want to be thought of, or they might have had listed. And the reason should be, again, obvious. Wall Street Journal story. What is happening is that for the first time in Major League, in history, MLB needs to know how tall everybody is with as much precision as possible. The reason? The sport's fancy new automated ball strike system couldn't function without it, which means that the days of players embellishing their heights for posterity are officially over. Makes sense in that for the system to work, MLB needs to define the strike zone, right? A surprisingly complicated task, as they mentioned in this story. While the rulebook attempts to explain what constitutes a strike, the reality has always been much more idiosyncratic, subject to the judgment of the home plate umpire. Took years of tinkering in the minors and a test run during the exhibition slate last year before league officials settled on an answer. For the purposes of ABS, you got your pen out? The top edge of the zone would be established at 53.5% of a batter's height, while the bottom would be at 27%. A hitter's stance, irrelevant. As a result, all spring, batters went through what's described as a rigorous measurement protocol. Players all required to show up between, get this, 10 a.m. and noon. Do you know why? That time period? Hey, want to take a wild guess?
Go ahead. I don't have anything witty to say.
People tend to shrink over the course of a day. Did you know that? People get shorter over the course of a day. So they're saying, well, if we're going to be accurate with this thing, we got to basically do it earlier in the day. Although then my question would be, what if the game's at night?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, don't we play a lot of night games these days? There's more night games than day games.
Did the room have to account for temperature?
It's a good question. I don't have any idea. They were instructed to wear socks without shoes and have their knees exposed. Slouching, strictly forbidden, as was standing with their feet spread apart. At which point, a group made up of mostly former strength and conditioning coaches traversed the highways of Florida and Arizona with measuring equipment to manually size up each player. Representatives from something called the Southwest Research Institute were on hand as well, using cameras to protect against what MLB describes as postural integrity issues. Bent knees, hunched shoulders, a tucked chin. We're trying to get an accurate representation of someone's true height without them being able to manipulate it in any way as well. Wall Street Journal tracked the heights of 667 batters over the past 2 seasons. And what they found was that on average, during this measuring process, the players lost about a half an inch of height, or just short of 23 feet combined. Example, Cleveland Guardians catcher Bo Naylor went from 6 feet in 2025 to 5'9" in 2026. Gavin Lux lost 3 inches as well, from 6'2" to 5'11". Alex Bregman, listed at 6 feet his last season with the Astros 2 years ago, he dropped to 5'11" with the Red Sox last year and has now settled at 5'10" in his first season with the Cubs. All told, there are 68 players previously listed at 6 feet or above whose height now begins with the dreaded 5. Oh, and here's the kicker, they point out. Then there's Shohei Ohtani, the baseball superhuman at this point, right? After claiming his 3rd MVP award and winning the World Series for the 2nd straight season, the 6'4" Ohtani actually grew an inch. He is listed no longer at 6'4". He is now listed at 6'5". He's maybe the only example of a baseball player who grew on the basis of this fancy measuring system. I had no idea. I guess it makes all the sense in the world that this would have to go on as a precursor to making the change, but I had no idea it was happening, and I'm not surprised at the number of individuals who were, shall we say, embellishing their height. It happens in basketball, of course, all of the time in basketball,
and on dating apps,
dating apps as well. That's very, very true. You finally found it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think this may be a good starting point for Gleeman, who I'm sure knows all about this. Aaron Gleeman is going to join us next segment. If you have questions for him, Bradshaw and Brian KFAN text line 64686. Perfect day for him, given the Twins open their home season on Friday. And we'll get his, I guess, reaction to the very early returns on the Twins. Kind of get caught up in a number of areas. Invariably, we end up talking Wolves with him, too, because he's such a big Wolves rube. But there you have it. The elaborate system in which dozens and dozens of players have been forced to stop lying to make themselves look better about their height. Because no one wants to say, what you want to say is I'm 6 feet. So you don't want to say 5'11" or 5'10", right? It just doesn't sound 6 feet. So, 6 feet. Oh, pretty good,
You would think with the new system you'd want to lie to be shorter. So the strike zone is smaller. That's what I would think.
Yeah, that's true. I guess you could make that argument.
That's why I imagine you have to have the knees straight. Yeah. Because if you're bending over now, you've got a shorter, you're challenging every pitch that's up.
And the question to me is, like every other sport, baseball players are really good at cheating. So I got to believe we're going to find out, and probably led by the Houston Astros, they're going to find some way to where they are slouching more, that their stance suddenly has changed in games themselves, as opposed to whatever way they were standing or not slouching when they were being measured. I'm hoping, I didn't see it in the story. It's a great piece, Wall Street Journal, how long it takes to do a measurement. Is it like an hour? Is it 5 minutes? They seem to have all this fancy equipment. I'm kind of curious to find out how that goes. And I don't see in this story, I'm wondering if any Twins got shorter or taller or whatever the case may be. I'm not exactly sure. But maybe Gleeman will be able to answer that question. In addition to Gleeman at 3:15 for, I'm sure, the rest of the 3 o'clock hour at least, We expect an in-studio visit as well with Pat Kessler. Comrade Kessler is scheduled for 5:30 today. Tomorrow's going to be a busy day. I think we get Seifert tomorrow. I know we get Andy Luger in studio tomorrow, bearing gifts, and maybe Russo Radio tomorrow because the Wild's next game is Thursday, I believe, at the arena formerly known as the X, correct? That's a home game on Thursday?
It is.
That's your information? All right, let's get our first pause in. Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line will be rebooted shortly. 64686. That is the number. And we'll say hello to Aaron Gleeman. Baseball questions, bring them in. Basketball, whatever the case may be. Back in just a minute here in the Fan. Questions already coming in for our 3:15 guest, Aaron Gleeman, kind enough to join us in studio. Welcome back. Were you able to get here? We now the construction season has resumed.
Yeah.
The Xenia Park Place exit, if you're coming from the west, it's gone again. It was gone for months before winter, and now it's gone again. There's like 5 detour options, none of them particularly palatable.
I drove around in circles to get here, but then it prepared me for the hallways and stuff here anyway, which is very similar to the roads.
More construction. Yeah. You're right. That's a very, very good point.
But I made it.
How was spring training for you?
It was good. Weather was nice. I usually go the first 2 weeks, in part because the players aren't yet sick of talking to media members, and the access itself is a little more free flowing. You can just kind of walk around.
Right.
I caught a few games and then headed back home. They didn't play well, obviously, during spring training. I don't know that really matters much one way or the other generally, but I don't know. I feel for him a little bit on the weather front, just because it's been off and on pretty nice in Minneapolis for the last week or so. And then I looked at the weather app for the next few days leading into the home opener, and they got the worst version of the weather.
So do we know the home opener's Friday, correct?
Yes. And unlike most years, the Twins home opener, as is the case with any non-dome team, will almost always have a day off after the home opener to sort of, as a fallback plan, if it rains, if it snows, if something happens, then you can just push the home opener back. They don't have that this year.
We don't have that.
They're just playing Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Which none of those 3 days look really nice. I say that as somebody, I'll be sitting in the press box, so whatever. But, I feel for them, because there's been years where they've pre-canceled even the day before and pushed back, just being like, why are we going to play in 35 degrees?
Well, we're supposed to get it's supposed to be sleet tonight into tomorrow, and then, but I don't think measurable still. I guess I can't play on ice either, I assume. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think they'll play it. Because, Tampa's not coming back here, so it's not like you're playing the White Sox, who come here 2 more times or something like that.
Did I see or read that we've got 17 home games in April?
Yeah, that's remarkable, because they almost always start with 6 games on the road to try to guard against the weather.
Right.
But MLB itself just overall started March 26th, which is so early.
That is early.
I mean, there's been years where it started in April. They've pushed that more and more. But it's a lot of April games, and I'm sure once I start writing and talking about their attendance, they will be quick to point out that they're behind the 8 ball in terms of that. But on some level, it's like you can't take from other teams just because this is a cold weather, non-domed place to play. Like, they still have to be part of the normal schedule making. But it is a little bit rough.
I was reading from a story. I'm sure you're familiar with this, but I was fascinated by it. This is from Wall Street Journal, and they're laying out the fact that apparently 68 players previously listed at 6 feet or above now are 5 feet 11 or 5'10 and a half, whatever the case. They're all shrinking largely because you got to have accurate measurements for this new ABS system to work correctly. Did you talk to any players about this measuring process?
Yeah, one of the days I was there, they were doing this. And I know there weren't like any really obvious ones for the Twins. But If you go talk to women, they've been dealing with this on dating apps for a long time. Guys 5'9" saying they're 6 foot.
Yes.
And I think anybody who's within range of 6 feet in dating, in baseball, in whatever, will just say 6 feet. And I think what we're learning is, a lot of guys are 5'9.5", 5'10", because now it benefits them, like you said, to be, it's not. There's also, I think, some confusion with that they're not adjusting it based on a stance. In other words, I'm sure you remember, Ricky Henderson used to get into that deep crouch.
Yeah.
And theoretically, that shrinks your strike zone. They're not doing that. It's basically, they're going to measure you. They're going to get it accurately. It will adjust. The strike zone is adjusted per batter. So, Aaron Judge has a much different strike zone than Jose Altuve. But you can't game the system further by, crouching all the way down. Ricky Henderson, Tony Phillips style. These are for old people.
Never underestimate the creativity of the Houston Astros.
Yeah,
to find some way around it to do something. So here's the other thing that caught my eye. The story indicated that the measurements all took place basically late morning. Because people tend to shrink.
Yeah, you compress, I guess.
Here's the deal. I mean, then it's not accurate. The numbers aren't accurate for night games. Because I mean, if you shrink, you shrink.
That's true, right?
So I don't know if that's going to be the alibi that bad umpires get. That the system itself is not as good as you think when it overturns us. But I just thought that was interesting. The whole thing is. You and I have not talked about the automatic, the ball strike deal, the whole approach. I'm an anti-replay guy in general because I think it's as odd as this sounds as someone who has no, dog in the fight. I'm far more interested in the effect on the flow and the aesthetics of the game than I am whether you get it right or wrong. I know players feel differently. Obviously, fans feel differently. They text me every day to that point.
I'm with you on the replay aspect in that I think they let far too many of them, and it's true in football too, but sticking to baseball, if you cannot replay this and come to a conclusion in 30 seconds, I think it should shut off after 40 seconds. I've been at games at Target Field where it's 4 or 5 minutes, and to me that's if you have to parse it like the Zapruder film, it's what are we really doing? Yes. So I do agree with you to some extent on that.
So is it what do we? I mean, I think what's sad is I've already heard from some people who seem to already derive more satisfaction from seeing an umpire exposed, humiliated than whether their own team wins the game that they're rooting for. It's I'm going to keep those. That's the only stat I think too many people are going to care about. And that to me, again, kind of misses the point. I don't know. Where are you on it, the whole thing philosophically?
I will say, having seen it in spring training and some AAA games and stuff, they've been testing it the past couple of years at AAA, it is very fast 99% of the time. It is truly the ump steps out, signals, 2 seconds, back in. I do think the thing I underestimated, and I'm curious to see when we get some home games here at Target Field this week, it's almost like a mini game within a game for the crowd. And I saw one in Cincinnati, maybe the first or second day of the season, where it was like a 2-2 count, and the ump calls a guy out on a third strike. Well, he challenges. It's a ball. Then it's 3-2. Next pitch, same umpire, same batter, calls it a strike, challenges it again. The crowd at that point is going absolutely bonkers because there's nobody likes umpires. I mean, let's be honest. They're the narcs of sports.
Right.
And there's also just that tension, even if it's only 2 seconds at a time of because
it's just
now
hold up.
There's going to be situations where 3 or more pitches in a single at bat are going to be overturned. And I just kind of want to see that from just seeing a car wreck sort of thing. And I deep down wonder if it will lead to subtle improvements in performance of some umpires because they're going to start to learn in real time the areas that they are calling things wrong, down and away or up. And they're just going to be sick of being humiliated like this. You can already see it, they're rolling their eyes sometimes and stuff. And so the only way to avoid that now is to start calling the rule book, strike zone correctly. So I wonder if it could have a subtle effect on actual performance of umpires.
Here's my problem with that. The obvious ones make it easy to say, my God, how do you miss it? But a lot of the ones I've seen...
Yeah, they're a tenth of an inch.
Exactly. I mean, they are arguable. And again, according to the computer, whatever it is,
just has to, if any part of the matter of a baseball nicks the strike zone, it's a strike.
But what I'm saying is, I don't think it makes you a bad umpire on those kind. It's because of the very nature of it.
I agree on that.
But I think people are going to continue to lose their minds. Here's the other thing I'm already predicting. So you can miss 2?
Yes. Basically, you get 2, and if you're correct,
you can
get
go the rest of the
infinite.
game.
Yes.
Yeah, forever. But and I know you're going to run out, even if you have a good percentage.
If you have 0 entering an extra inning, it resets to 1.
It does reset to 1.
But if you have 1, you don't get an extra 1.
Okay. But what's going to happen here. We're going to get to the 7th or 8th inning, and there's going to be teams that even have been tried to be careful,
right?
But they're still not going to have any left, and it's going to be, we need more. We need an unlimited. It shouldn't matter whether you are correct or incorrect. We need an unlimited number. That's what people are going to demand. And I know the comeback is, well, minor leagues, this worked pretty well. But isn't it fair to say that most people really don't care about the results of the minor league game?
I mean, the difference between a playoff game versus a AAA game or whatever. They need to have some limits in place to stop every pitch from being challenged, obviously, just at the most extreme level. So that's what they're going for. I do agree with you that I think it's an eventuality that, game whatever of the World Series, some team's going to be out of challenges. There's going to be some egregious call, but also we see that in other sports too. When NBA Finals are out of challenges, whatever. Yeah, right. What I think is going to happen is either this year, next year, whatever. Very soon, there's going to be a moment like that is headline making, where it's like, oh my God, this game turned on a very clearly incorrect ball strike call that no one could challenge, and then people are going to start to say, well, if we have the ability to quickly correct every call, why are we even using a challenge system?
Exactly.
Why not just get fully into robot mode?
Yeah.
And so I think that's probably a few years down the road.
I'm fine with the old fashioned way, even with some umpires who stink. But if you're asking me, you can't have that anymore, Dan. That's over.
Right.
I would rather do what you just suggest. Let's cut with the nonsense, trying to play it kind of a middle ground way, I guess, to keep the umps and the union happy. Let's cut to the chase and get to where inevitably we're going to go. Now, maybe baseball knows that's where they want to go, but that this was the interim step that we needed to take.
To get your foot in the door, you get people used to it. It's similar to the pitch clock stuff, where it's like, in baseball especially, because it is such an old-timey game and the crowd is old and everyone who loves baseball, including me now, is old.
Right.
Any change, getting rid of the DH or adding the DH to the National League, or even the thing 5 years ago or 10 years ago when they were like, we're not going to have intentional balls anymore. You just hold up 4 fingers. People freak out about anything.
That's true.
Pitch clock.
That's true.
I'm sure we had similar conversations.
Oh, yeah.
2 games into the pitch clock, people were like, this is great.
I loved it even before they started. I demanded it, actually.
I would, if anybody's skeptical about it, watch a few games, actually see how quick it moves. And then the other thing I'll note is that there are some non-American leagues, I think Korea, I want to say, that are using full robot umpiring, and they just have a headset in for the umpire, and then they're just getting a signal on every play. I think there is some, or at least going back a couple of years, I know there was some skepticism that the technology was in place to fully have quick, accurate measures of, all 300 pitches every game. But I suspect we've reached the point now where that is eventually where this is headed. And, maybe it's only until the next CBA or the next umpire negotiation where it's like, why are we limited to challenges? Why are we leaving ourselves open? And it's a little bit like, last 2 minutes of a football game, the referees can just review a play no matter what. And I think it's going to skew more towards that because, like you said, there's inevitably going to be some call where a team is out of challenges and everyone is freaked out and they're like, why is this system as limiting as it is?
But isn't it also, though, if we go to that system eventually, I refuse to believe that we're not going to still get hitters and pitchers who say, sorry, I know I'm supposed to believe the science, but I don't. Something's wacky here. It's different in this ball, but there's something about it that's off. We're never going to get to that place, do you think, where people are going to go, they always get it right?
You're asking if I think we'll reach a place where large numbers of people will not have anything to complain about as the number one complainer in the world. Maybe 2 of the top 10 complainers in the world in this room.
That's true.
Come on. Yeah. I think I can tell you that in 2021 or 20, when they did the late start to the season for COVID and they did summer camp at Target Field instead of normal spring training, they brought in umpires and used what were robo umps at that time. And the big question was, pitchers were sort of messing around with these big, high-breaking kind of Bert Blyleneff curveballs and basically saying, can I drop this thing from the sky and have it just kind of nick a corner of the bottom of the zone? But they've adjusted that it's only a 2D instead of a 3D model now that they're using now, so that you can't just loop a ball in.
Interesting.
And so they have, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be, like you're saying, some complaints within that. Inevitably, the technology, there are kind of brownouts that happen where if there's like a cloudy day, you might miss a pitch, in which case you just have to stick with whatever the umpire called. And there are going to be moments like that where people are kind of questioning where we're at, and it'll be adjusted from that. But I don't know. I'm an old guy at this point, and I don't like change in general in life or in sports, but I really do think it adds a kind of interesting element. And also, I just get so sick of, in any sport, the narrative around we got screwed by the umps, we got screwed by the refs.
I'm with you on that.
And in Minnesota, obviously, that's forever a thing. And I'm not saying it's undeserved, but at some point, it's like we can pretty easily just use modern technology to get rid of even 2/3 of these issues. Why not at least start down that road?
Shot.
Yeah.
218 guy writes, strike zone hack, sleep standing up.
Stretchers.
I guess nothing would surprise me. Is it CB Buckner? Is that the name of the ref? Umpire. Texter writes, he certainly needs replay to follow him around. Apparently, he can't tell if a guy touches the base right in front of him. See last night's Brewers game.
Yeah, he's had a rough week, and he got hit by a pitch today, like an hour ago, and left the game.
Purposeful?
That would be interesting.
I bring this up, though, because the substitute producer of this show is so into the schadenfreude of exposing umpires and refs.
I think he's not alone there. Yeah.
I mean, before the show began, he's yelling it in my ear. It's unbelievable.
He's still upset about that Ron Gant, Ken Herbeck deal.
Probably
is.
The
number one brand.
I'm mad about the infield fly from 2012. That's what I'm mad about.
That'll work too.
Well, you're going way back.
Yeah.
That's pretty
He's
good.
just salty in general.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And I'm not sitting here standing tall for a bad umpire. I worry about anything that makes the focus. I just think there's going to be, in this interim period, so much of an obsession that people are not, they're going to have another reason to not watch the baseball and the game and the flow of the game to, he blew another call. I knew it. And it's, I guess, to each their own if that's what attracts you about a game. But to me, it has nothing to do with what's supposed to bring you to the game.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's true. I think as long as it's not adding significant time, and I don't think it will.
That's fair.
We're talking seconds instead of minutes, even for a game that has a lot of challenges. The other thing I've noticed already, and you saw Derek Shelton got ejected.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that.
He goes down in history as the first ABS ejection for a manager. The other thing, though, I've seen is, the rule is, let's say for a batter, it has to be your first movement to tap your helmet to ask for a challenge.
Correct.
And what they're trying to stop there is any influence from the dugout, because you're supposed to only be able to do it yourself. And so they don't want, even out of the corner of your eye, someone to be able to look, let's say, to Derek Shelton.
Somebody's pounding a tin can.
Right, whatever the case. And so what we've run into because of that, and I get why you'd want to do that.
Yeah.
There's been a couple instances where it's, the guy starts to take a step back to the dugout and thinks, I'm going to challenge this. And the umpires, who's, by the way, probably motivated not to have that challenge, says, oh, no, it's too late. You can't do that. And so I wonder how many situations like that where you're relying on the person who is theoretically being proven wrong to also allow or disallow the challenge. And I think that's some murky waters, too. If you're CB Buckner and you've already had 5 calls overturned in the third inning and someone didn't make their absolute first movement tapping their helmet, you can say, oh, no, too late. You can't do it. I don't want to be shown up again.
This is from 973 guy. I have a feeling a lot of the old head umpires will be retiring after this year. Well, let me ask you about that, because implied in that is if you get younger guys, everything would be fine, which I don't agree.
There is data on that, though.
Oh, is there data?
There's a direct correlation between age.
So does that have to do with, okay, I have my strike zone.
Right.
I've done it this way forever. I'm not going to adjust no matter what you say.
I think it could be a little of that. I think it could be as simple as just eyesight. A 30-year-old versus a 60-year-old or whatever. And I also think that the younger umpires are coming up through the minors being judged on this specific strike zone. And so they are sort of tailoring their own strike zone on what the rule book ABS strike zone is. Whereas, Hunter Wendelstedt or whatever, who's been in the majors already for 30 years.
I'm old enough to remember his father,
Right,
Harry Wendelstedt, for God's sake.
He's already got a strike zone. He's been doing it for 30 years.
Yeah.
What is and isn't a strike at AAA 3 years ago doesn't matter. So I think it's almost like a self-selecting group a little bit.
I wish they would get rid of the rectangle during the television broadcast. I swear that was the downfall of Dick Bremer. Bremer was way too obsessed with it, 100% as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if it had anything to do with his downfall, but to me, it used to drive me crazy because he would only bring it up when it didn't suit the purposes of the home team. If you want to make a big deal about the rectangle, then you got to do it whether it benefits your club or hurts your club. Either way, on the Twins broadcast, is the I don't even remember now in games.
There,
is the rectangle still up?
They're not showing as much. Like it's there, but it doesn't like automatic. Here's the one thing I'll say about the rectangle. I know this was the case a few years ago when it first started. It's not the accurate strike zone. It doesn't adjust by player, and there's plenty of instances where to the TV broadcast it looks like a strike, and then you go on MLB.com, Baseball Savant, some of these sites that are actually using the tracking data, and it's not a strike, or vice versa. And I know people.
Well, the announcers never acknowledge that, do they?
Yeah. So it's a sort of guesstimate of the strike zone in real time, like super real time, which can have its own issues.
I would say that's a good reason to not use it then.
Yeah, well, for the
I think it gets people worked up too much, sometimes unnecessarily. We get worked up enough as it is.
It's funny also talking to people about this, even just in general with the addition of the zone on broadcast several years ago, where it's like some people react to that and say, what I've learned is umpires are pretty good. Whereas other people react to it and go, what I've learned is there's a dozen marginal calls a game and they just coin flip. There is a limit to just what the human eye and brain can do, which is what you were getting at on the ones that are, a tenth of an inch or whatever. It's like, you're not right or wrong on that. You're just in your head internally flipping a coin.
It's a call on every pitch. It's the only sport in which literally there are continuous calls to that extent that we can react to and identify with.
But I also wonder, like, at the end of the year when we look, I suspect it's going to be something like 1% of pitches get challenged, roughly. So you're dealing with, 1 out of 100. And then I wonder, within that, I think teams are going to push players to do them in high leverage spots. In other words, unless you are absolutely certain that what you challenge is going to be overturned, 90% certain, if it's the second inning of a tie game and it's a 1-1 count, don't bother losing it. Whereas if it's extra innings, and if a tie game and a 3-2 count with the bases loaded, it almost doesn't matter if you think it's wrong or right. You might as well just challenge it on the 1% chance. So I think as we get further down the road,
I don't think NBA players understand that.
Right.
I really don't. Because it's human reaction. It's a wrong call. Come on, let's do it. Let's twirl the finger. But in all honesty, by that same logic, it's probably not worth ever doing. I don't think it's hardly ever worth doing in the first half of a game.
Yes, I think that, and as we get further along with this, what we're going to see, I think, because this is what was shown in the minors when they tested it, catchers are by far the most reliable narrators of this thing because they're not as emotionally invested of pitchers. They're used to framing the pitches, and also just the angle that they're taking is directly in the zone. Hitters are pretty good at it. Pitchers are horrendous at it. Like, they have by far the lowest success rate because they're emotional because they think everything should be a strike.
Yep.
It's their pitch, basically. But also, a lot of them are falling off the mound or their back is turned. And we've seen a few instances where a pitcher will call for it, and it's like, that wasn't even close. So I think managers are going to start more and more stressing, don't waste these or even risk wasting these in these non-leveraged early spots. Save them for the moments that really matter. It's like using a pinch hitter or something. Like, why are you using this guy in the fourth inning? And then also, we trust the catchers. We sort of trust the hitters. We don't even really want. I won't be surprised if there's several teams that are just like, pitchers cannot challenge. We're not letting them challenge.
That actually might make some sense. Aaron Gleeman is in studio. Let's get a pause in now. I want to stay with another esoteric baseball subject. We will eventually get to the Twins, although I don't even know if we need to. You can maybe help us with that on the basis of what you saw in spring training, your own projections, and what we've seen very early in the season as well. We'll try to mix in some questions via the Bradshaw and Brian KFAN text line at 64686. More Gleeman coming up next.
Never miss your chance to know what the latest sports news is in town, chances to win tickets, You just want to know what's going on with your favorite fan shows. You can follow KFAN 1003 on all of our social channels like Instagram, TikTok, and X. You stay connected and follow the sports leader, KFAN.
Here's my other esoteric question or subject matter. I'm reading that there is a rapid revival of a pitch that had basically almost been eliminated from Major League Baseball in large measure because it was believed that it ruined pitchers' arms. The split finger fastball is now back, allegedly, bigger and better than ever. And what is annoying to me about this is, and I guess it's, you live and you learn, and maybe even the doctors and the scientists do too, how do we go from worst pitch for a pitcher to throw to, you know what, on further review, we were wrong about that. There's other things, but it's not necessarily related to the throwing of that pitch, which comes from the old-fashioned forkball, correct?
Yes.
Back in the day.
Yeah, and I remember, I think Roger Craig, not the running back, but the manager, with the Giants, I want to say maybe in the 70s, I want to say, something like that.
That's right.
Had a bunch of guys on his staff do that. He was sort of at the forefront of that. And yeah, I do remember even as a kid reading like, oh yeah, you can throw it, but not for long, like, Bruce Sutter or something like that. I think one of the things that was proven is in Japan, almost every good starting pitcher throws that as almost like their changeup. And there's been some American pitchers, even Joe Ryan, for instance, ditched like a normal kind of traditional changeup for a little bit like of a splitter hybrid, because it can have the same effect of just sort of dropping off the table low in the strike zone. Like it appears like a fastball and then just sort of disappears down, which is what you're going for a lot of times with the changeup. And so I think you kind of gradually saw more and more MLB pitchers lean into at least a hybrid version of that. We're also just at the point, because of technology and the ability to track everything, and Joe Ryan's a good example, like he will in a given week just in the bullpen be like, hey, I was tinkering with the grip on my slider, and it used to be, you throw one and someone goes, hey, it seemed like it cut a little more. Well, now you can track that on every pitch, even in a bullpen or a side session or whatever. So pitchers have a lot more ability to tinker meaningfully and actually try different grips, and they can almost test it without hitters. Like you can get the characteristics of a pitch and kind of know how it will play for the most part before even testing it against live hitters. And so I think that plays a part too. And, pitchers are splitters a little bit back. There's now differentiating between curveball, slider, sweeper, which I know annoys people. We're just thinly slicing more and more kind of similar pitches that have slightly different characteristics, to the point now guys are throwing multiple fastballs. There's four seam, which is a normal fastball. There's two seam, that's a sinker, but there's, a riding fastball, cutting fastball, one that you can, like Joe Ryan throws, that almost appears to trick the brain that it's rising, even though that's impossible, because it's coming from a weird angle with weird characteristics. And so a lot of pitchers now are trying to have multiple fastballs in addition to multiple off speeds. I
thought the old-fashioned forkball was intended to be also a pitch thrown fast.
Yes.
But the splitter, not so much, right? The splitter is a different speed.
It's a little more of a change-up type thing. Okay. And I remember like Rick Aguilera used to throw that as one of his. There are some examples of it. I think, unfortunately, we're just at the point where throwing a baseball, period, is bad for you.
Seems to be.
And so, yes, maybe some are worse than others.
Right.
And everyone has an example that they point to, Nolan Ryan, everybody goes, why could he do it? Well, he's superhuman, basically. But just the physical act of throwing a baseball, and if everyone's getting hurt all the time, even though innings counts are shrinking, pitchers are throwing fewer pitches than ever, but getting more hurt than ever, because they're also throwing much, much harder than ever, then maybe everything's out the window in terms of, well, this pitch might have been a little worse for you, but who cares? Because everybody's hurt, bring it back. But yeah, I am curious to see. And I also think the Japanese influence, there's just so many good Japanese players, but especially pitchers now. 3/5 of the Dodgers rotation is Japanese, and they can all throw a splitter. And I think people see success, and it's a copycat league.
A texter who likes the esoteric stuff here asks a good question. Why aren't there any screwball pitchers anymore? What's a screwball?
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so where did all the screwball pitchers go?
The last one I remember was like in the early 2000s, Jim Macier, who was like a setup guy for the A's. It's basically you throw it and you sort of twist your arm the opposite direction as you're releasing it. And so it's kind of moves a little bit like a reverse slider. Like it moves the opposite direction. Right. And so that was for many years, I don't know if this is true from a data standpoint, but that was for many years viewed as like, oh, you can throw it, but it'll wreck your arm.
So it'll fall off.
Because there's this weird torque involved. And it was almost like a little bit like a knuckleball in that washed up guys who were trying to resurrect their career would start to throw it a little bit.
Because they had nothing to lose.
But yeah, that is one that has not made a comeback.
No, the pitcher I remember going way back who turned into a great screwball pitcher, I think his name was Jim Brewer with the Dodgers. And I think he started with the Cubs, was awful, and then went to L.A. and they taught him the screwball, and it changed his entire career. And naturally, it was the Cubs were left in the dark.
That is a source of innovation, especially among pitchers. Is like I'm really bad. Remember R.A. Dickey?
Yeah, that's right.
A normal pitcher who couldn't be healthy and couldn't be good, and then he thought, what if I just throw knuckleballs but hard instead of lobbing them in there? And he wins the Cy Young Award.
That's right.
2 years later, he's not good anymore. But you do stumble across a lot of that in baseball, pitching more so than
we have no knuckleballs left, do we? Knuckleball pitchers?
Very few.
Yeah,
I mean,
think so.
Only the position players who are thrown in mop-up situations are throwing knuckleballs.
Question for Gleeman. This is from Paul out of Florida. Going back to our discussion about, the balls and strike challenges. A batter has a 3-1 count. Runner on first base is stealing. The ball is called a strike. The runner is thrown out. Batter challenges the pitch, and it's ruled ball 4.
Yeah.
Now, is the runner safe since it was ball 4? The answer would be yes on that, correct?
I guess, yeah. But I think what happens, I don't know this. I haven't seen this yet. I think you need to play it out as if.
Okay.
Which you'll see often in like football or something. Like they won't call a guy down because they'll let the play happen and then review it.
New trend.
Like don't stop something that might get reversed anyway. But I don't know 100% that that's the case in baseball.
So you spent time in spring training. We haven't really had that much season begin yet. It's in its infancy. What did you take away from spring training with the Twins that might be instructive even now, given we've played very little baseball?
Yeah, well, it was rough. They lose Pablo Lopez literally on day 1, 3 hours into the thing. And to me, that I wasn't optimistic to begin with, but any notion of them being competitive to me was completely dependent on the starting rotation being very, very good, top 8 in the league, let's say. And you lose Lopez, and then also David Fest has been hurt, and all of a sudden you go from having 8 starters to 6 starters, and now it's like, well, Bailey Ober's got some question marks too because he's throwing 88 miles an hour now, and now it's like, well, if the rotation isn't even really a strength relative to the league, I don't think the lineup looks great.
Yeah.
It's struggled the last 2 years, sort of the same core, and I'm really extremely low on the bullpen, which hasn't been a huge issue yet, but I think will be an issue. And so I kind of came away from spring training. My opinion wasn't swayed one way or the other because it was pretty low to begin with, but I thought, well, if the rotation isn't capable of at least carrying an otherwise kind of underwhelming roster, then what do they have that's an advantage, even within the AL Central, which is not going to be a great division as usual. And so, yeah, I think they're really facing an uphill battle here. I also think the defense doesn't project to be very good, particularly in the infield, particularly up the middle, shortstop, second base with Lee and Keishel. I think that's not going to help a mediocre pitching staff as is. And then you also, you're counting on the usual stuff of Buxton staying healthy, Joe Ryan staying healthy, which has been a little bit of a coin flip at times. So I don't know that I think they are destined for 110 losses or anything, but I think to me the cap is sort of competitiveness and the floor is similar to last year where you get to the deadline, which this year is August 2nd, I think, and you're a half dozen games below 500. It makes it obvious that you sell. And then the question is, how much do they sell? And then what do they have from a talent standpoint to backfill those spots? Because we saw last year in August and September, they didn't have anything to backfill those spots. They were calling up quad A guys to just take roster spots, and they were the worst team in the league. I think they have prospects in place that can step in there, but also while their upside is higher than kind of the 35-year-old veterans from last year, prospects can flop right away too. So that I kind of see it playing out similar to last year, where they're just kind of a run-of-the-mill bad team for 2/3 of the season. Then they sell off, and then they become a true bad team at the end.
Gleeman 2 days ago. I tried my best and mostly failed to make sense of the Twins putting Cody Clemens in the leadoff spot. What's this all about?
Yeah, I personally don't understand why they're overthinking Luke Keishel, who was very good as a rookie, and stylistically, he's a guy who makes a lot of contact. He takes walks. He's going to hit for a pretty good average. He doesn't have huge power, but when he's on base, he can run. Mm-hmm. To me, whether that's old school, new school, whatever,
still valuable.
He's one of your best hitters, and he's a prototypical leadoff guy. What I want in a leadoff guy is one of your best hitters because you're giving him the most plate appearances, fast, and get on base. I don't know why they're overthinking it and not just putting him in the leadoff spot, putting Buxton second, who's got power. You want him behind your best. Instead, they're batting Buxton second, which is fine, batting Keishel third, and then they don't have a leadoff guy, so they're using Austin Martin against lefties, which makes a little sense stylistically. And then, as you said, Cody Clemens against righties. No offense to Cody Clemens, who's a useful player, but he was essentially a waiver claim last April. He's known because of his dad is a great pitcher, obviously. The skill he has that gets him to the majors is some left-handed power. But he strikes out a lot. He's like a 205 career hitter, horrible on base percentage, not a base stealer really. Why would you take a guy whose only real strength is some power and who's really deficient at the areas that you would typically associate with batting first in a lineup and stick him first in the lineup? I don't understand that. Now, is it going to matter if the team's bad anyway? They're going to end up tinkering with some stuff. But to me, it's just like, put Keishel first, put Buxton second, and then try to figure out the other 7 spots because those two are, I think, very good fits there.
What do they say when you ask? I assume you have.
They like the matchup. They think he can jumpstart the offense. I will say this, they don't have a lot of good hitters, period. And so if you're not going to use Keishel number 1 and you're not going to use Buxton number 1, it's, do people want to see Matt Wallner? They used him a little bit last year. Josh Bell's very slow. They're not going to use him. Royce Lewis hasn't been consistent enough to bat leadoff, et cetera, et cetera. And I think they would like a left-handed hitter because Keishel and Buxton are both right-handed. You'd want to avoid 3 straight right-handed hitters to start a lineup, basically. So I get the idea of just kind of sticking a random left-handed hitter up there. I just think, to me personally, Clemens is maybe the worst option, just stylistically. All
right, we got more Twins to get to. I got a couple other potential trade questions, and then maybe we'll try to mix in a little Wolves as well as we finally get to pretty much the stretch run here. Wolves, I think, down to 7 games left this season. Gleeman, and if you have questions for Aaron Gleeman, 64686 is the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line. Kessler is in studio beginning at about 5:30. Andy Luger in studio